Welcome, everyone, to my second podcast. I'm really thrilled to have a returning guest with us today, someone whose insights I deeply value. Charles Otterman, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Bridget, it's an absolute pleasure to be back. Thanks for having me again. I really enjoyed our last conversation, and I'm looking forward to diving into this topic with you today because I know it's something that you feel very strongly about, and honestly, so do I.
Absolutely, Charles. And I think, for me, especially in recent years, it just feels so incredibly important to stand up against what I see happening with President Trump and the movement that has really formed around him. I mean, it doesn't feel like ordinary political disagreement anymore, Like I can totally live with differences about taxes or regulations or which programs deserve funding. Those are things we can debate, we can find common ground, we can disagree respectfully. But when the conversation starts turning toward things like racism or white Christian nationalism or this constant scapegoating of immigrants and minorities, or just this broader habit of frankly despising your neighbor, that to me isn't just opinion. That crosses a really significant moral line.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Bridget. It's like there's a spectrum, right? And on one end, you have policy differences, which are essential for a healthy democracy. But then on the other end, you have what you're describing, which really feels like an attack on fundamental human decency and the values that I think most of us hold dear. It's not about left or right anymore. It's about basic respect and empathy. When the rhetoric gets dehumanizing, that's when it stops being just politics.
Exactly. And for such a long time, I think many of us were just taught to keep the peace, to be polite, to avoid conflict, to get along, as they say. And I understand why people do that, truly. We don't want to lose friends or strain family relationships or turn every single gathering into an argument, especially during the holidays, right? It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. But I've come to believe that appeasement in these situations really has a cost.
It definitely does. I've seen it play out where harmful ideas are spoken out loud, maybe at a family dinner or among acquaintances, and everyone else just goes quiet. And I think in that moment, the people who are quiet might think they're being thoughtful or restrained or just trying to avoid a fight. But the thing is that silence, it doesn't actually come across that way to the person making the harmful statement or to anyone else listening. It often reads like permission, doesn't it?
100%. That's why I truly believe silence stops being neutrality. It starts looking an awful lot like consent. And that's a hard pill to swallow because nobody wants to think they're consenting to something they fundamentally disagree with. But if you're not actively pushing back, even in a small way, what message are you really sending?
It's a really powerful point, Bridget, and it makes me think about how we define courage. Sometimes courage isn't about grand gestures. It's about those small, everyday acts of speaking truth, even when it's inconvenient or makes you uncomfortable. And the idea that silence can be consent, it places a real burden of responsibility on all of us, doesn't it?
It does, and it should. I think we all have that responsibility. And I want to be clear, standing up doesn't have to mean screaming at people or cutting everyone off. That's not what I'm advocating for. It can be so much simpler than that. It can be refusing to laugh at a racist joke, or challenging a false claim with a simple factual correction, or just naming a dehumanizing statement for what it is and saying, you know what, I don't agree with that, and it's actually not okay. It can mean drawing boundaries at the dinner table or in church circles, at work or online, especially when vulnerable people are being targeted and told they don't belong.
Those are such practical and important examples because I think sometimes people feel paralyzed, thinking they have to have a perfectly articulated counter-argument or engage in a full-blown debate. But often it's those subtle cues, those firm but not aggressive pushbacks that can shift the dynamic. Just that moment of, I don't agree with that, or that's not funny, it plants a seed, both for the person speaking and for anyone else who might be listening and feeling uncomfortable themselves.
Exactly. You're not trying to win an argument necessarily. You're just stating a boundary. You're saying, this is where I stand. And I speak up because, frankly, history shows us what happens when decent people convince themselves it's not worth the trouble. We've seen it time and time again. Normalizing extremism doesn't make it go away. It actually makes it bolder. It emboldens those who hold those extreme views, and it pushes the boundaries of what's considered acceptable. And if I want to be the kind of neighbor, the kind of citizen, and the kind of person of conscience I claim to be, I just can't trade my integrity for comfort.
That's a profound statement, Bridget. Trading integrity for comfort. And it really resonates because it touches on that fundamental human desire to avoid discomfort, to avoid conflict. But you're right, history is replete with examples of what happens when that desire for comfort trumps moral conviction. It's like a slow erosion of values, where things that were once unthinkable gradually become acceptable, just because nobody spoke up early enough to stop it. We see it in smaller social circles, and we've certainly seen it on a larger societal scale throughout history.
It's a slippery slope, and that's why these small acts of resistance, these small moments of speaking up are so critical. I'm not trying to win every single argument. Honestly, that's exhausting and often counterproductive. What I'm trying to do is be clear about what I will not tolerate. I won't tolerate racism dressed up as patriotism. I won't tolerate nationalism dressed up as faith. And I certainly won't tolerate cruelty packaged as just telling it like it is, because those things are insidious and they do real harm.
Yeah, the reframing of those harmful ideologies is particularly dangerous when you can cloak something ugly in the guise of something noble, patriotism, faith, honesty. It becomes much harder for people to identify and resist. It confuses the issue, and it makes people who might otherwise be allies hesitant to speak out because they don't want to be seen as unpatriotic or against faith. It's a very clever and very damaging rhetorical tactic.
It really is. And so for me, if my voice can help set a standard, if it can make even one person feel less alone in their discomfort or their opposition, or make one harmful statement go unchallenged one fewer time, then honestly, it's worth the discomfort that I might feel in that moment, because that discomfort is temporary, but the impact of silence can be long lasting and really damaging.
I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, Bridget. It shifts the focus from winning a debate to making a difference, even a small one. And that less alone part, that's huge. When you hear someone else vocalize what you're thinking or feeling, especially when it's a difficult or unpopular stance, it can be incredibly validating. It gives you courage. It reminds you that you're not an outlier, that there are others who share your moral compass. And that collective strength is really what we need to push back against these tides of division and contempt.
Exactly. Because in the end, Charles, we don't just choose our politics. We don't just choose who we vote for or what party we align with. We also choose what we're willing to overlook. And for me personally, I'm just not willing to overlook the business of despising my neighbor. It's a fundamental part of who I am, and I think it should be a fundamental part of our society. It's about empathy. It's about basic human dignity.
That's a powerful closing thought, Bridget. It brings it back to the core of what it means to be a decent human being. Choosing what we're willing to overlook is a constant moral inventory, isn't it? And deciding not to overlook the contempt for others, that's where true integrity lies. It's not easy, it's often messy, but it's absolutely necessary. And I completely agree with you on that. Thanks for sharing such a clear and courageous perspective.
Thank you, Charles, for your incredible insights and for joining me in this conversation today. It means a lot to have you here and to discuss these really vital topics. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. I hope this conversation sparks some reflection and maybe even some action in your own lives. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Bridget. Always a